Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the 32-acre property that my wife and I purchased last year. We've worked really hard to clear off about 3 acres all by ourselves, and we're finally at the point we're ready to break ground and form up this foundation for this barn build. We call this the 100-year-old barn because hopefully that's what it's going to look like when it's finished, as well as having a small living quarters for our family to live in. Because we're so particular about things being done right, and let's be honest, also because we're too cheap, we're going to do absolutely as much of this that we can ourselves. So if that sounds interesting to you guys and you want to follow along, hit the subscribe button to keep up to date with what we end up doing ourselves and what we end up giving up on and just hiring out. In the last episode, we were out here digging this footer and forming up the perimeter foundation wall. Now we have to go back and we have to put rebar all throughout it. A little bit of rebar will add a tremendous amount of strength to your concrete. We are going back through and we're putting 3 bars of rebar on the bottom, as well as 1 rebar on the top, and verticals every 2 foot all the way around. This is way overkill for this type of building, but hey, we want this to be done right and we want to do it only one time. So the first thing I did is temporarily put these spreader cleats up on the top of my foundation boards. After that, I was able to go ahead and just lay my rebar up on top of those, so it's really easy to work with. Now, eventually these spreader cleats will be pulled out, and all of this rebar you're looking at right now will go ahead and get dropped down to the bottom of the foundation. One really important part about rebar is anytime you have a splice or a cut, you have to have a proper overlap of your rebar. The way you typically calculate that is you take the diameter of your rebar, this is number 4 or 1/2 inch rebar, and you multiply that by 40. So in this case, we need about a 20 to 24 inch overlap at every one of our splices on the corners as well as on our straight pieces. So we're starting on that corner down there, but just to make sure everything lines up well, we're going to go ahead and jump down to this corner. That way, if we have a little bit extra overlap somewhere, we can make sure that we account for it here and we don't have to cut a whole bunch of rebar. We'd rather just overlap it in the middle than cut it off. Now this rebar doesn't have to be tied so tight it can't move at all. You're really just trying to tie it tight enough to hold it in place while we're setting concrete. So it doesn't have to be overly tight or overly fixed, just as long as it'll stay in place. Alright guys, back out here for another day. Yesterday we put this horizontal rebar, 3 bars on the bottom. Today we're going to start working on putting our verticals in. Let me tell you, it's getting pretty cold out here pretty quick. I'm in the sun, so I'm okay right now, but these woods are starting to thin out, and it's a good reminder that fall is coming quickly, and we got to get this project wrapped up. So we really are starting to get under the gun to get this done before we get too much cold weather setting in. So let's hurry up, let's get this vertical rebar set, and then hopefully we'll be pouring concrete in the next week or so. So this vertical rebar is going to attach, and it's going to be aligned up right over the center bar. That way we can keep this vertical rebar tied in and as straight as possible. So we're going to start tying this. We really want this rebar about every 2 feet. So we're going to just start going down the line. It's going to be hard to get these things to stand up perfectly straight now. So we'll probably just let them lay over, and then we come back with our verticals. Then when we come back with our top bar, we'll of course tie them all together and make sure they're standing up nice and straight then. I've never done vertical rebar tying before, so I'm a little anxious to see how it all goes. We'll find out pretty quick though. Just a little jig to hold this while I tie it. We'll see if that helps. Makes it any easier. Now that we have all this vertical rebar tied all the way around, these rebar chairs helps hold this rebar up off the ground just about 3 or 4 inches. So we'll just put this right up under. We'll give a few little wire ties to hold it in place, and then we'll be able to start lowering this down. Sometimes these rebar chairs can get crushed, so we'll have to put plenty of them out here to make sure there's not too much weight, because this is holding up quite a lot of rebar. Once we lay these down, they'll be right there in place to hold this rebar up off the ground about 3 inches. We're just going to start in this corner and slowly work our way down and see if we can't get this rebar to nice and gently fall down in its location. Didn't exactly go quite as well as I'd hoped. Some of these rebar chairs immediately bent as soon as they got some weight on it. So I do have some of these plastic ones that we'll fill in with, but as you can see, it's not exactly as good as I was hoping for. So we'll see if we can't straighten this out a little bit. After looking at it for a minute, I really don't think it's that far off. I think part of what was causing my confusion is all my verticals fell over, and it looks like there's a lot more kind of laying on the ground out of place, but it's really not as much the rebar as it is just the verticals. So we'll go ahead and just tie some of these in, see if this is even going to work with tying the way we were planning to tie these verticals. And but I'm pretty happy with the way the rebar is in the bottom. This project has certainly taken much longer than expected, but as I always say, that's becoming the expected out here. We've been unbelievably blessed to not have any rain. We got maybe a little bit of a drizzle a couple of nights ago. It's been almost 3 weeks now with no rain at all. If we were to get some rain through all this, our foundation would be such a mucky mess. So man, we have been so blessed for it to be as dry as it has. Unfortunately, some of the grass has died because of it, but yeah, you just got to deal with what you got sometimes. And I would much rather dry footers than green grass at the moment. The slump is a measure of how wet your concrete is and how wide it will spread when it's not contained. So they do what's called a slump test, kind of like a funnel upside down. It's like 12 inches high. And then they pack it and they take the funnel thing off, and then they measure how far it spreads out when it's not contained. And so it's like 12 inches tall. We're going for like a 4-inch slump. So that means it'll only drop like 4 inches. So when you apply that to the footer, it looks like our boards aren't low enough. And that concrete's gonna fill. But because it's a low slump, it's not gonna run. Good morning, guys. Back out here, really trying to wrap up this foundation. We've gotten all of the rebar done as far as the verticals and the bottom supports go. We've also come back through now. We put in these spreader cleats to keep our forms exactly 12 inches apart here and 8 inches apart on the back. And then we've also come in, we've driven about 100 of these stakes, which will be our supports for our kickers. A couple things we have left to do before we call it an inspection is we're going back through, we're putting these mats in up under all of our posts. I'd pre-made these, but they still needed a little modification. So I'm tweaking those, getting those put in. And then we have some of these pretty large L-shaped pieces of rebar. This rebar is going to go in around those piers also. And they're going to sit there so that we can tie our slab into our piers and our perimeter foundation wall whenever we get to the slab. One other thing we can't forget about though is we do want to put some drainage so that we have a way to get water that ever gets under the slab out. So we're going to put a few pipes in so that we can drain out, as well as we have to think about our sewer line where that's going out to the septic, as well as our water ingress. This rebar mesh isn't required by our engineering specs, but I figured if we got the time, might as well put it in there and make it stronger than before. So that's really the only reason why we're doing this. I wouldn't exactly say we have time, but we've already pre-made them, so it makes a lot of sense just to put them in. We've already called in our inspection for tomorrow. So today it's imperative that we get all of this rebar buttoned up so that we're 100% ready when they come tomorrow. With any luck, we'll be pouring concrete in just a couple days, so crunch time is on. It's the final push. We have a few more days of dry weather and then it's going to start raining. So I was planning to come over here and put these horizontal rebars coming through our formwork so we can tie all this together so that when we do our slab we have a good connection here. The problem I think we're going to have though is this is going to make it almost impossible to get these form boards out when it's time. I'm just getting real nervous looking at some of these of, you know, how much time and effort it's going to be when we got to strip these forms. And we got this rebar, if it's not sitting there perfectly straight, it's just not going to happen. So I think at this point, I'm going to just abandon the horizontal rebar to tie into the slab. If we want to do that later, we can always drill an epoxy into it all the way around. All that we have left to do here is we bent some V-shaped rebar that's just sitting down in here off of our vertical, and we're going to go ahead and just tie those probably on the top, maybe one on the bottom where we can, so they stay in place. This should give these posts some good lateral strength. But other than that, this rebar is done. Well guys, we got some great news out here. We just passed our inspection and everything is good to go from that perspective. So we have all of this metal in here. It is all wrapped up 100%. I'm very happy with how this is coming out. The only thing left to do at this point is to go ahead and order concrete. I just calculated by taking measurements at the top and at the bottom all the way around this whole thing. We need 45 yards of concrete. So that is significantly more than I was originally anticipating, but it's because I wasn't really accounting for some of the areas that we had to widen this foundation to get everything perfectly aligned. But that's okay. It is what it is. It doesn't really matter at this point. The last steps to do before we're ready to pour this concrete is just to put these kickers in, straighten everything up, lock it all down, and then guys, we'll be ready for concrete. We're gonna do that in the next episode. So if you've enjoyed this, seeing us put this rebar in, and if you want to follow along to see how this foundation pour goes, we'd appreciate you to hit the subscribe button, where we'll be pouring that in the next video. Thanks guys, we'll see you in the next one.